It was a foggy morning when Evelyn Hayes stepped off the 7:15 train back into the town of Crowhaven. The mist rolled through the narrow streets like breath from a sleeping beast. She stood there for a moment, suitcase in one hand, coat buttoned tight, watching people rush past her without a second glance. She had been declared dead 8 years ago. And yet, here she was. Her name was written on a headstone in the town cemetery. Her photo had once been printed on missing posters and news reports. Her disappearance had puzzled the police, shattered her family, and broken the heart of the man she had loved. But now, Evelyn walked the same streets that had once mourned her, and no one recognized her, not even the grocer who used to smile and give her free apples when she was a teenager. She had changed, yes. Her once long hair was now cropped short. Her frame was leaner, hardened by years of survival, but her eyes held the same stormy gray hue. And her memory was as sharp as it had ever been. She had come back for one reason: to find out who had tried to kill her, and why. 8 years ago, Evelyn had vanished during a summer storm. She had been 26, full of plans for her future. She had just gotten engaged to Lucas, her childhood friend turned fiancé. The night she disappeared, she had been on her way to meet him at the old lake house they were planning to renovate together. But she never arrived. Her car had been found wrecked at the bottom of a cliff, partially submerged in water. The body had never been recovered. Authorities assumed she had been thrown from the vehicle and swept away by the current. After months of searching, she had been declared legally dead. But Evelyn had not died that night. Someone had pulled her from the wreckage, someone she never saw. And instead of calling for help, they had taken her far away, drugged and broken, to a place she still had nightmares about. She had escaped after 2 long years, but not without scars. She had spent the last 6 years hiding under a false identity, healing slowly, watching her past from a distance, until she was ready to face the truth. And now, she was ready. Evelyn made her way to a quiet bed and breakfast at the edge of town, checking in under a new name. She chose a room with a view of the church steeple and unpacked with the precision of someone used to moving often. On the nightstand, she placed a small wooden box. Inside it were 2 things: a folded photograph of her and Lucas, smiling by the lake, and a note she had found in her jacket pocket the night she woke up in the strange place years ago. It read, "You should have stayed away." That note haunted her more than anything else. Someone had wanted her gone. Someone close. Now she was back to uncover what really happened. And this time, she was not afraid. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Evelyn looked out over the town she once called home. Her face was calm, but her mind was burning with questions. Someone here thought she was dead. Someone here had lied, and she had returned to find them. The morning air in Crowhaven smelled like dew and memory. Evelyn wrapped a scarf around her neck and walked to the old town library, her steps steady, her eyes scanning every face. The library had not changed in the years she was gone. The ivy still clung to the red brick walls, and the heavy wooden doors creaked just the same. It was the one place in town that held records, articles, and whispers, all things she needed. She found an old newspaper archive tucked away on the 2nd floor. With her fingers trembling slightly, she pulled out the stack labeled 2017. Her disappearance had made headlines. She read through each article, carefully. Local woman feared dead after car found in river, engaged to be married, now missing without a trace. Authorities suspend search for Evelyn Hayes after 2 weeks. But one small column caught her attention. It had run nearly a month after she was declared dead. Titled "Private Vigil at the Lake House," it mentioned Lucas holding a silent memorial by the dock they once called their place. Her throat tightened. Lucas. She had not dared to look him up while she was away. She could not bear the pain if he had moved on, married, or forgotten her. But now she needed to know where he had been that night, what he had done, and most of all, if he had known what happened to her. That afternoon, Evelyn walked to her childhood home. It had been sold long ago. A new family now lived behind those familiar blue shutters. The swing her father built still hung from the tree, but it no longer squeaked with her laughter. She did not stop, just stood across the street for a moment, then moved on. At the edge of town stood the lake house. It had once been her dream, a fixer-upper with a wide porch and a view of the water. Now it was abandoned, windows boarded, weeds crawling up the stairs. Still, Evelyn approached. The air smelled of wet wood and something else, something faint but familiar. Her feet moved quietly up the steps. She tried the door. Locked. She circled around to the back and found the window by the kitchen, the same. One Lucas used to leave open for her on hot nights. It slid open with effort. She climbed in, her heart thudding in her chest. Inside, the house was cold and hollow, but it felt like stepping into a frozen memory. The table still had marks where they had carved their initials. The walls still bore faint outlines where pictures once hung. And on the mantel, covered in dust, was something she never expected to find. A candle, burnt down halfway. The exact kind Lucas had used at their anniversary dinners, cinnamon and clove. Someone had been here recently. She reached out, touched the edge of the wax. It was soft, still warm. Suddenly, footsteps creaked on the porch outside. Evelyn ducked low behind the counter. Her breath slowed. Her fingers wrapped around a rusted fire poker lying by the door. The knob turned once, then stopped. Whoever it was, they did not try again. A pause, then retreating footsteps. When she finally rose, the fear in her chest had shifted into something else, determination. Someone knew she was alive. Someone knew she had come back, and that meant her search was no longer a secret. The game had begun. The next morning, Evelyn stood outside the cafe on Willow Street, where she and Lucas used to meet for early breakfast dates. It still had the same yellow awning and the tiny wind chimes at the entrance that jingled every time someone stepped in. Her fingers trembled as she pushed the door open. Inside, time seemed to pause. Behind the counter stood Lucas. He looked older, of course. His hair was shorter, streaked faintly with gray. His shoulders looked heavier, as though years of grief had left their mark. But his eyes, those warm, steady eyes, were exactly as she remembered. He looked up, and for a moment, he stared at her like she was a face in a dream. She held her breath. "Can I help you?" he asked politely, his tone cautious. Evelyn realized he did not recognize her. Not yet. She lowered her head slightly and forced a small smile. "Just a coffee. Black." He nodded and turned away. As he moved, she studied him. How his hands still shook just slightly when he was nervous. How he still wiped the edge of every cup before serving, a habit born from years of perfectionism. When he returned with the cup, he hesitated. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No," she said softly. "Just passing through." He nodded but kept looking at her, like something about her tugged at an old part of him that refused to let go. "Lucas," a voice called from the kitchen. "We're low on filters." "I'll get them," he said, then turned to her. "Enjoy your coffee." She watched him disappear behind the door. Evelyn sat by the window, her fingers wrapped around the warm mug, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him why he never looked for her harder. But she knew he had. She had read the articles, seen the reports. He had led search parties for weeks, cried on live television, collapsed at her funeral. He had mourned her, and somehow he had moved on, or tried to. When he returned a few minutes later, she stood up and left a bill on the table. As she reached the door, he called out softly, "Wait." She turned. He stepped closer, eyes narrowed in confusion. "I know this sounds strange, but have we met before?" Her chest ached, but she forced herself to smile. "No, but thank you." The coffee was perfect. She stepped out into the sun, her knees nearly buckling from the weight of everything she wanted to say. That night, back in her rented room, Evelyn pulled out the small wooden box again. Inside, behind the photo and the note, was a small silver chain. Lucas had given it to her the day he proposed. She hadn't worn it since the night she disappeared. She held it to her chest and whispered, "I'm still here." Then she opened her notebook and wrote down what she had so far. The accident was no accident. Someone pulled her from the car. Someone left the warning note in her jacket. Someone lit a candle in the lake house. Recently. And now, someone knew. She had returned. She tapped the pen to her lips and wrote one more line. "If it wasn't Lucas, who wanted me gone?" Because the more she dug, the more she realized her killer had not disappeared. They were still in Crowhaven. And they were watching. Evelyn could not sleep that night. The questions spun in her mind like wheels on ice, slippery, fast, and impossible to stop. She lay in the quiet room at the edge of town, listening to the wind tapping against the windows. Whoever had walked up to the lake house had not tried to hurt her, yet, but it meant something clear. They were still out there, still close, and still dangerous. The next morning, she decided to visit the one person she had not yet faced. Kara Whitfield, her best friend from childhood. Kara had been her closest, confidant, her partner in every mischief, and the maid of honor she never had. If anyone had sensed something off back then, it would have been her. Kara still lived in the same house, a white cottage on the east side of town. Evelyn walked up the gravel path, butterflies stirring violently in her chest. When she knocked, the door opened after a long pause. Kara stood there, a little older, softer around the edges, her eyes widening as she saw Evelyn's face. She didn't speak. Evelyn waited. Finally, Kara whispered, "No, it can't be." Evelyn's eyes brimmed with tears. "It's me, Kara." The door flew open, and the two women embraced, trembling. Kara pulled her inside quickly and shut the door. I went to your funeral," Kara said breathlessly. "I cried every day for months. What happened? How?" "It's a long story," Evelyn replied, "but I need your help." They sat on the couch, and Evelyn told her everything, what little she remembered from the night of the crash, the years in captivity, the escape, the hidden letter, and the visit to the lake house. Kara's face went pale when she heard about the candle. "Someone's been going there? Someone lit it recently, and I think they knew I was there." Kara stood and paced nervously. "There's something you should know," she said, then hesitated. "I never told anyone this because it felt wrong, but the day before you vanished I saw you and Lucas arguing at the cafe. You were crying." Evelyn frowned. "We didn't fight, not seriously." "I thought so too," Kara said. "But something was off, and after you disappeared, he shut down completely. I always wondered what really happened that night." Evelyn sat silently, her thoughts spinning. Kara walked to a small drawer and pulled out an old envelope. "This came a few weeks after the memorial. No return address. I never told anyone. It felt threatening." Evelyn took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a single strip of paper, typed in black ink. "Some secrets are better left buried. Let her stay dead." Her hands trembled. "You kept this all these years?" "I didn't know what to do with it," Kara said. "I thought maybe it was someone being cruel. But now..." Evelyn folded the note and placed it in her coat pocket. "It's the same tone as the message I found in my jacket after the crash." Kara looked at her, panic beginning to rise. "You're in danger, Evie." "I've been in danger for 8 years," Evelyn said quietly. "But now I know. Someone's trying to keep the past hidden, and that person may be closer than I thought." As she stood to leave, Kara grabbed her hand. "Please, be careful." Evelyn gave her a soft smile. "I came back to find the truth, no matter where it leads." She stepped out into the gray afternoon, clutching the note in her pocket. The shadows in Crowhaven were getting thicker, but so was her determination. And now, she had a new lead. Someone wanted her to stay dead. But Evelyn Hayes was very much alive, and she was just getting started. Evelyn spent the next 2 days walking a careful line between silence and suspicion. She kept her movements quiet, made no unnecessary phone calls, and told no one where she was staying. The threat in Kara's letter proved what she feared. Someone had been watching. Someone had sent a warning, even before the world thought she was dead. But now she knew where to go. The lake. The crash site. She had avoided it all week, but it was time. Time to go back to where it had all started. Evelyn arrived just before dusk. The cliff where her car had gone off the road stood quiet and still. The guardrail had long since been replaced. She parked a short distance away and walked slowly toward the edge. Her boots pressed into the soft earth as she reached the exact spot where her car had once plunged into the darkness. She stared down at the water below, calm, reflective. It had swallowed the truth that night. She turned to the trees behind her, searching. There had to be something. Some sign she missed. Then, tucked between two thick branches, something glinted. She stepped closer, brushing aside a wall of leaves, and found a rusted metal box wedged behind a root. Her heart pounded as she pulled it free. Inside were several folded pieces of paper, each yellowed and brittle. The first was a note, typed. Again. You weren't supposed to remember. I warned you. Beneath it, a small photo of her and Lucas, taken days before the crash. The same photo she had kept in her wooden box. The last sheet sent a chill through her entire body. It was a blueprint of the lake house floor plan, with one room circled in red. The basement. She swallowed hard. The lake house basement had always been sealed. She remembered asking Lucas to open it once when they first bought the place, but he told her it was filled with old junk and nailed shut for safety. She had never pushed, but now she was going to open it herself. That night, under cover of darkness, Evelyn returned to the lake house. The key she'd found under the porch mat still worked. She slipped inside and made her way down the back hall toward the basement door. It was just as she remembered, chained and nailed shut. It took her nearly an hour to pry the boards loose. Her fingers bled, her arms ached, but she did not stop. When the door finally creaked open, the stench of dust and mold hit her instantly. She turned on her flashlight. The room was small, damp, and empty, except for a table and a small stack of boxes. She opened the first one. Inside were newspaper clippings, all about her. Her disappearance, the search, the vigil, even her legal death certificate. Notes were scribbled on them in red ink. Too soon. Not yet. She's getting close. Her breath caught. She moved to the second box. It held recordings, cassette, tapes, each labeled with a date, starting from the night she vanished. She picked one up and inserted it into the old player beside the table. With shaking fingers, she pressed play. At first only static. Then a voice, her own voice, sobbing, begging. Then a second voice, one she hadn't heard in years. You should have stayed quiet, Evelyn. You never learned when to stop. Her knees gave out. She knew that voice. She had loved that voice. It was Lucas. Evelyn sat frozen on the cold basement floor, the cassette player still spinning in the dark. Her own screams echoed faintly from the speaker, but she barely heard them now. All she could hear was his voice, calm, measured, chilling. Lucas, the man she had loved, the man who had cried at her funeral, the man who looked her in the eye just days ago and offered her coffee with a smile, was the same man who had nearly killed her. The betrayal pierced deeper than any wound. She reached for another tape, inserted it, pressed play. She keeps asking questions. I warned her. I can't. Let her ruin everything. The voice was clearer now. Lucas, no doubt. He had recorded his own thoughts, like a diary, confessions spoken into magnetic strips, never meant to be found. Evelyn's stomach turned as the reality settled in. He had planned it. All of it. And now, she had proof. She packed the tapes into a satchel and rushed out of the lake house, her breath visible in the cold night. As she stepped outside, headlights flashed in the distance. A car, parked down the road. Someone was watching. She didn't wait. She ran, feet pounding the dirt, her mind locked in survival mode. The car started up behind her. She turned into the woods, heart slamming in her chest. Branches scratched her face, her arms, but she didn't stop. She ran until the lights disappeared, and then silence. Back at her room, she bolted the door shut and plugged in her old burner phone. There was only one person she trusted now. Kara. When Kara answered, Her voice was laced with panic. "Evie? Are you okay?" "I have everything," Evelyn said. "Tapes. Notes. He did it. He tried to kill me." There was a pause. "Lucas?" "Yes, it was him." "I'll come now," Kara said. "We'll go to the police together." Within 30 minutes, Kara was there. They drove straight to the sheriff's office. Evelyn handed over everything, the recordings, the notes, the box she found near the cliff. The sheriff, an older man who had been on the force during her original case, stared at her like she was a ghost come to deliver justice. The investigation reopened that very night. Lucas was arrested at dawn. The town was stunned. The cafe closed permanently. Rumors flew, hearts broke, and for weeks, people whispered Evelyn's name like a prayer and a warning. Lucas never spoke a word in his defense, but the tapes spoke for him. His motive was bitter, rooted in control. Evelyn had discovered that Lucas had been embezzling money from a charity project they were working on together. She had threatened to expose him. He had silenced her the only way he knew how, or so he thought. Months later, Evelyn stood at the lake once more. This time, not afraid. The water was calm, the sun warm. Life had returned to her in slow pieces, and though she would never be the same, she was no longer lost. She had solved her own murder. She had written her own ending, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Sometimes the people we trust the most hide the darkest truths. But even when the world believes you are gone, your voice, your truth, can still rise. Courage is not just surviving. It is returning to face what was meant to destroy you, and uncovering the truth, no matter the cost. Subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories that stay with you, just like this one.